Hello, my name is John Curse, FIDE Master from Australia, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you back to 1952 at the U.S.S.R. Championship between the mighty David Bronstein and the MIKHAIL Botvinnik. Botvinnik was playing the black pieces, and it's a King's Gambit Accepted, and it's the Abbazia defence. As it was in the 1952 U.S.S.R. Championship, the mighty Botvinnik tied with Mark Taimanov, Grandmaster Mark Taimanov, and then went and won the playoff and became the USSR champion. Right, now, not only, I'll just talk a little bit here about the mighty Botvinnik, MIKHAIL Botvinnik. His chess pupils, they included such grandmasters and world champions as Anatoly Karpov, Garry Kasparov, one of the greatest players that's ever lived, and Vladimir Kramnik, not to mention the great Vladimir Kramnik, who was a world champion. Right, so the game starts e4, e5, f4, e takes, knight to f3, d5, e takes d5, knight to f6, with the intention of recapturing the pawn, holding the pawn on f4. Bishop to b5, check. Maybe I can keep the pawn, keep the extra pawn. c6, d takes c, and b takes c to get extra time to develop those pieces, because that's what white's not interested in pawn structure so much. I say black's not interested in pawn structure so much because white's pawn structure is clearly better. What black's looking at is rapid development as compensation for his pawn structure. White plays bishop c4, black plays knight d5. White plays d4, black replies with bishop d6, holding the f pawn. White castles and black castles. White plays knight c3 with the idea of, say, knight to e4. Black won't have any of that, so he takes that knight off and then doubles those pawns, those c pawns. Bishop to g4. Black must be active. He also wants to play knight b5 to d7. So he moves his bishop first, so when he plays knight to d7 and develops it, the knight won't block his bishop. So it's important to play the bishop first. Queen to d3. White does not like that pin. Knight to d7. Here, David Bronstein comes up with an idea. It's a unique idea, and a lot of weaker players might not see it coming. But after g3, if pawn takes pawn, knight to g5 is a triple attack, right? It threatens checkmate, and it's got three pieces on the f7 square. So, black smartly declines and plays knight to b6, and the bishop returns, bishop to b3, and black plays c5. He thinks, oh, I can't have any of this. This is dangerous stuff. I'll do anything. I'll even play c4 and then rip your king side apart after swapping, getting rid of that white bishop, that nasty white bishop. White declines, right, to remove his bishop. And now, as you can see from the analysis bar on the side of the board, the black has got an advantage. Queen to f6. Black decides that he's going to get his queen into the game. Knight to e5. Now, we're looking at a position where black is white's trying to get the pawn on f4, and there's a whole lot of play that white has got on that pawn on f4, and certainly it looks like, to all intents and purposes, a very, very strong move. But black simply captures it, and white recaptures, and black recaptures. Black's not perturbed about the black squares and the pawn being captured. So we can see then, after bishop takes f4, white appears to have a fairly good game. Except for one thing, his bishop looks like a pawn. I'm talking about the bishop on b3. It looks like a damn pawn. So, I mean, he's playing a piece down. Admittedly, the knight hasn't got much promise where it is, but if that knight were to move over to the king's side before that white bishop extricates itself, well, white could be in dire trouble. So queen to h5, rook on the f file to e1. I would think at this stage that you'd be trying to get your bishop out somehow, but I don't know how it can be done. So white's move, rook on the f file to e1, at least that threatens rook e5, an attack on the queen, an attack on the c-pawn. If the c-pawn falls, then we know that white bishop could be extricated from the b3 square. Now, there's a lot of play around that now. Rook on the f file to e8. Immediately black senses the danger and the threat of rook to e5. White plays a4 with the idea of a5 and the bishop on b3 being able to come out via a4. See, once he comes out, once that white bishop comes out, black will be right in the game. Here, black takes advantage of that extra dynamic development and plays bishop to e2. Sometimes in these positions, you can give up the exchange and play rook takes bishop, but the problem here is, if you played rook takes bishop to give up the exchange, black would be threatening mate, right, on the h2 square, combined with the queen and the rook, and white still hasn't got the bishop out of b3. So white needs time. He needs time to get his bishop out. So he plays queen to c3. Black says, all right then, while you're getting the bishop out, I'm going to maneuver my knight around there to the king, towards your king, and if I can go knight to d7 to f6, I will be able to put pressure on your king, and I'll have 5 and 3 is 8 and 9 is 17 points mustered on your king side, on the white's king side, and you won't be able to hold your position. It's just simple mathematics. The knight's worth 3 points, the rook's worth 5, the queen's worth 9. Just add them up and count what the defender's numbers are, and unfortunately they're lacking. So knight d7, a big threat of knight to f6. White plays a5. He says, I've got to get my bishop out. But has he got time? Has he got time to do it? He sees just behind one more move. If it was white's move, he could play bishop to a4 and he'd be winning, right? So it's just a move, one simple move. It's all about tempos. So knight to f6, threatening knight to g4, and checkmate down on h7. White tries to extricate his bishop. And black says, all right, you got your bishop out, but you're not going to chase me away from what I want to do. And he plays rook e6. And count the pieces defending the king. Again, if you around that little square there's only like a rook and a bishop in those 16 squares near the king. 16 squares, 4 by 4, near the king. There's only 3 and 5 is 8, whereas black's bringing in a queen, 9, and a knight, that's 12, and a bishop, 15, and the castle's ready to come in too. That's 20 points. So I try to measure things in points. King to g2, he thinks, well, maybe if I can just get a chance to play bishop to if I get a chance to play h3, for instance, I might be all right. And white plays knight to e4 and hits that queen. He goes in the other way. He doesn't go into g4. He goes into e4. And now we can see what he's doing. He's threatening to play g4, g5. And if he can play g5, pawn to knight 4, hitting the bishop, rook to h6 would blast the king right off the board. The queen goes all the way onto the other side of the board, far away from the defender, and now comes the big blast, g5. And now we know that that's the end of the game. There is no defence against rook h6. All the white pieces have been removed from the defence of the white king. And now if the white bishop were to find a square to move to, then it'd be all over. Red Rover. So listen, thank you for watching that game today. David Bronstein did the manly thing and he resigned. And MIKHAIL Botvinnik, well, he won that game. He went on to beat Mark Taimanov and win the U.S.S.R championship. And have a very wonderful chess career. Okay, listen, thank you very much for your time today, and I'll catch up with you next time. Cheerio net for now.